Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to attempt to build a ultralight 5-inch quadcopter. Now the thing that is literally weighing us down at the moment is battery technology, but one of the things that is getting better is the components that we are using. So rather than having separate ESCs and separate on-screen displays, etc., it is now possible to have a much more compact quadcopter. So that is the idea with this. Now up to date, I think most of my 5-inch quadcopter builds have come to about 590 grams all the way up to 630 grams, something like that. Hopefully this is going to be much lighter and we shall see. So the components that I'm going to be using, the frame is the Hyperlite Floss, and it's called Floss because it's a really minimalistic frame, tiny arms, and of course the trade-off with that might be the strength of it, but we shall see when I build it. And to go with that, these are the Hyperlite motors as well, and they should weigh less than your normal 2206 motor. So you can see there they have a minimalistic bottom to the motor there. The trade-off being, of course, is that if we get dirt in there, it's going to get absolutely caked. But I think they weigh about 4 grams lighter compared to a normal 2206 motor, which isn't that much, but every gram is expendable in this build. So yeah, this is the motor there. They do a higher kV edition, but they weren't in stock, which is a shame because that may have meant more power. But anyways, this thing should be like a rocket anyway, hopefully. So those are the motors. They're hollow shaft on them as well. Like I say, everything has been done to make them as light as possible. Then for the brain, I'm going to be using the Flytower F4. So this is a 4-in-1 ESC there, and then we have the F4 flight controller with a built-in VTX as well. So the only thing that I should need to connect to this is a camera. So speaking of the camera, I'm going to attempt to use the Runcam Micro. Now I may struggle with mounting it, so if I have to change any of these components, you know, as a compromise or whatever, then I'll let you know as I go through the build. So this is going to be kind of like a log rather than a how-to, but obviously, you know, the way that it gets built is very similar to quadcopters I've built in the past. And then for the receiver, I'm going to be using one of these XM Pluses, again, to make it as lightweight as possible. It's a shame there's no built-in receiver on this, but there you go. I think that's the only thing that it is missing. And for the battery, I think I'm going to be using a 1000 milliamp Turnigy graphene battery. Like I say, this is going to be a lightweight setup, so I might want to use a lighter, smaller battery as well to get the most amount of performance. And propellers, I'm not sure on yet. I've got some various options. I have got the Dell Cyclones, which I hear are pretty good for this kind of thing. And any of these components that I'm going to be using, I'll link in the bottom there if it turns out to be a good build. It might be too crazy for my skills, but I want to go for it because it's different, and I think this is the way that things are going to be going. So it's going to be kind of like a 2017 updated build, because I've done a few builds on the channel and they're still relevant. The techniques that I used are still the same. It's just that it should be much easier. It shouldn't be so much of a challenge because now we have these all-in-one components, and it should just be a few solder joins and that should be it. So let's get cracking and see how it comes out. So starting off with the frame, of course, and the first job is to attach the arm, so I'm putting this screw through here. Now the screws are really easy to figure out because they don't work in any other configuration, so really easy to know which one to use. And then there's this locking nut going on here, just hand tightening them. For now I'm putting this standoff screw through here. Yeah, make sure that you tighten them up properly with a tool, of course. And then we have the front arms going on here as well. Again, have the locking nut going on here, and then the other side, and then we have some standoffs here for the top plate, so that is just going in there, and then one on the other side. Just hand tighten them for now, but I do tighten them up properly with a proper tool. And then we have these locking nuts here that go over the back standoffs. You're going to need a tool to screw those down because of the locking mechanism, and I also had to detach the tool there because the screws were very long. And then the other side there, and that is the main part of the frame. Now this is a screw going in to house the SMA adapter. It's really tight, so I had to screw it into the frame, and then that has a little bracket there and also a locking nut, so just tightening that up. And then the motors are going in, so I used all 4 of these screws on the motors, just making sure that everything is lined up and the motor is in the center. I didn't use thread lock here, I just made sure everything was tight and that was fine. So just doing that for all 4 of the motors. Really tedious task, but of course it must be done. So I've just cut it a little bit short here and just tightening it all up. And then these are the standoffs at the front for the ESCs and flight controller to sit on. So we have a nylon standoff going in there to line up with the back screw. So that's 2 of those going in there. And now I'm tinning up the ESC board, and I'll speed that up so you don't have to watch it in slow motion. These pads are really close together, and it's definitely the most stressful part of the build, soldering all these wires in, which you'll see in a bit. Now you don't get given XT60 with this combination, which I think is a shame. So I made my own up here, and that is the positive going in. Again, really close together, so you have to be very careful that nothing is shorting there. So I've put the ESC board onto those standoffs, and now I'm cutting the motor wires to length. Just give myself a couple of mil in excess so that they definitely reach. And now I'm using my wire stripping tool to strip all of the wires. Say Eclipse wire stripping tool, and it's expensive but it does a good job, so nice tool there. Now I'm tinning up all of these motor wires here. Again, it's essential that you do that so you get a good solder join, but make sure that the solder doesn't flow too thickly because these wires are going to sit very closely together, as you can see. So this is motor 4 that's going in, and everything lines up nicely with the ESC board. And then this is motor 2. I don't know why I did it in this order, but it doesn't matter. I'm soldering everything straight and then changing the direction in Blheli S later. So this is motor 1 going in, and then this is motor 3 going in. You can see how close these sit. Make sure they don't bridge, otherwise we'll have a lot of smoke. So now I'm putting these standoffs on, so these come in the kit because we have these pins, can you see there, and the flight controller just slots straight in to the ESC board, so no soldering for the PWM there, just slot straight over the top, which is really nice. And then I'm using these nylon screws here to secure everything down but not have them too tight. So now I am putting in the SMA connector, it's RPSMA, and then I'm feeding the coax through the bottom there, and that just connects on the top there. And then this is a heat sink, but I'm just placing it so that I can still remove the flight control because it gets in the way of the nylon screws. And now these are the 3D printed mounts for the Runcam Micro. You just have to reverse them for the Micro, so they're designed for the HS1177 size, but you can see they reverse them and it fits the Micro no problem, which is really nice. And that just places over the standoffs at the front. Then this is the wire that you're given in the ESC and flight controller kit. That just plugs straight in to this camera. Really fantastic, so no soldering there. Made the build nice and easy there. And just tucking the wire in so it's nice and neat. So this is the XM Plus receiver, just soldering the pins on there. I could have soldered the wires direct to save weight, but I couldn't be bothered. And then just clipping the excess pins off there on the back. And you are given a heat shrink with the XM Plus, so just using a candle lighter to shrink that down, and that works nicely. And then I'm plugging in the included connector for S-Bus and then plugging in the XM Plus receiver. And now I need to set up a model, so I'm going to create a model in the Taranis. I exit the wizard and page over to the model name, so I'm going to call this model the Floss, of course. And then I need to page down to the bottom to change the failsafe, because you can see it says not set. That needs to go to no pulses in order for it to work. And then I'm just going to page up to make sure I'm in D16 mode. And now I'm going to page over to the inputs because I need to change my auxiliary. So auxiliary 1 is going to be for arming, and then I'm going to change the source to the 2-position switch on the Taranis, which is this one here. You just have to select it and it automatically changes it there. And then I'm going to press exit and then exit again and page over to the mixer and just add it here. So I'm just going to put A there. I don't like to type in arm twice. And then long press the page button to go back to the inputs. And now this is going to be auxiliary 2 and this is going to be my modes. And I'm going to select this 3-position switch here and then exit and exit again. And then repeat same as before, so tab over to the mixer there and change this to M. I don't like to type out mode twice, so I just put M and then exit and then long press page again to go back to the inputs. And then I'm going to have a 3rd auxiliary for a buzzer, and we'll attach a buzzer in a bit and I'll show you that. And then just select the switch there. We have no more 2-position switches, so I stick it on this 3-position switch here at the top. And then if we page over to the mixer, do the same again, but just put B for buzz, and we are done. So the next thing to do is to bind it. So I'm going to press the bind button here on the Taranis. It'll start chirping away. Make sure that you put an antenna on here before you power anything up. Now I'm going to press the bind button on the XM Plus here, very tricky to do, and then I've got my 1000 milliamp Turnigy battery. I'm just jamming that in there, and we'll have a green and red flashing light to show that it's bound. And then I'm going to press exit here on the Taranis, and then when we plug the battery back in we should get a green light to say that it is bound. So the next thing I'm going to do is plug in the buzzer that I've made up, and I will just zoom in on that so you can see which pin is which for a buzzer. And then this is the screw for the back standoff. Again, it's very tight, so I just screwed it in there, and then I'm screwing it into the back standoff with a hex driver. So next it's time to put on the top plate, which looks kind of like a G-string. Again, using a hex driver there. And now I'm tidying everything up using cable ties, so that's for the receiver to be nicely in place. And then this is for the motor wires for the front arms, just cutting them to length there. And then for the back, I'm going to also feed my antenna through underneath, so I'm going to put 2 cable ties on here. You can see the antenna feeding through underneath. Just tighten that up and cut it off, and then I'm going to do the same for the other side, and that is the antenna secured. nicely. So the last thing to do is to cable tie in the buzzer so it's not flopping around. So I'm just going to put that on the back standoff there and cut that to length. So here we are in the Betaflight configurator. You get it from the Chrome App Store. Now there's a couple of important things to note when it comes to the firmware of this Flytower F4. The first one is that I found out the hard way that the latest version of Betaflight, which at the date of making this video it's 3.17, does not seem to work with S-Bus. I just don't get anything through on the receiver whatsoever. 3.16 works fine, and the way that you flash it is we have a bootloader button on the flight controller, so you press that in whilst plugging in the USB into the computer, and then that boots up in DFU mode. It came with version 3.10 out of the box. So I've got the USB connector plugged into the quadcopter and the computer. I've also got the battery plugged in as well, and I've got the Taranis turned on. You can see it says COM16 at the top there. So I'm going to connect to it, and it's taken a while there. There we go. It's finally connected. Now I don't have the quadcopter on a level surface at the moment, but obviously you're going to want to do that and calibrate the accelerometer. We've got the VBAC coming through there. I'm going to enable expert mode. So I've gone to the ports here. So we need to have the serial RX on the UART 1 for S-Bus, so I got that turned on. Then we've just got a VCP here for the USB, and then if we go into configuration, there we don't have any board alignment, which is fine. Now this is interesting. Out of the box it had Dshot selected, and I cannot get Dshot working with this system. It just freaks out, so I don't know what that's all about. But anyways, I can never tell the difference between OneShot 125 and Dshot, and if you can, then maybe this isn't the flight controller ESC combo for you, but there you go. I found that it's working fine. So I've got motor stop turned off here, and I've got the minimum throttle set to 1040. I found that out by going in the motors tab, which I'll show you in a bit. Max throttle 2000, which is fine for the Taranis. So if we scroll down here, I've got serial RX selected for the receiver and S-Bus for the receiver. I've got the VBAC turned on for the buzzer. I have got the warning cell voltage at stock. I might reduce that actually to 3.4, and then the minimum cell voltage at 3.3. And I didn't need to change any of the scaling here. And then if we come down here, we have some important stuff here. So in order for the receiver to work, I had to turn on telemetry. Not sure why that is, but that is just the case. LED strip is turned on, but I don't have any LEDs selected. Black box, yes, we can put a micro SD card into this flight control, but I haven't done that. And the OSD as well for the Betaflight on-screen display, and then everything else here is turned off. Failsafe, I've got it set to drop, which is the stock Betaflight setting these days. Then if we go into PIDs here, I think these are just the stock Betaflight PIDs. I'm going to try those out and see how I get on. I have upped the Super Rate to 0.8, which is my normal thing to do. Into receiver, so I've got TAER for FR Sky, you can see that's working there. Now it seems that the XM Plus hasn't come with the RSSI firmware installed, but that's fine. A lot of the pro guys aren't using RSSI information on the on-screen display anyways, so yeah, I've got that disabled. So if we go into the modes here, I have got it to ARM on auxiliary 1 as per the setup. I've then got on auxiliary 2 angle, and then acro and air on a 3 position. Then we've got the beeper on aux 3 there, and then motors, as I'm using OneShot 125, I did calibrate the ESC, so you have to tick this button here, unplug the battery, put the master up to full, plug the battery in, and then reduce it down, and then that will calibrate. For the on-screen display, I have changed a couple of things. So we've got the craft name down here, the voltage and the mode, and also the fly time and the on time as well. So the craft name is actually in the configuration, and that is something that I changed to AndyRC down there. LED strips just got nothing. And then if I go into the CLI, you can check out the version. And if for some reason not showing you the version, I don't know why it's doing that. There we go, 3.16 there. So I'm just going to disconnect on here, and then we're going to go into Blheli suite and connect to it, because I did have to reverse 2 of the motors. So everything soldered straight meant that all of the motors turned clockwise, so I had to reverse motors 2 and motors 3 there, and that sorted that out. And I've also got brake on stop turned on as well. So if I just disconnect from there, so I just missed the minimum throttle, didn't I? So if you go into the motors tab, make sure that you have got the props off, and then lift these little sliders up here, and then when the motor is spinning nice and freely, whatever that figure is there, then you can put that into the minimum throttle. It just so happened to be 1040 for this one. So that is the Betaflight and Blheli setup. Okay, so the last thing to do is put the props on. Now the way that I remember how to do that is the props always turn inwards, with the curve of the prop facing inwards at the front and also inwards at the back. So I'm using a tool now to tighten all that up. These are the Dell Cyclone props. I may change the props up later. And then the 2 battery straps go in. And there we go, finito. So let's just check out how much this guy weighs, because it's meant to be an ultralight after all. So I have got a 1000 milliamp Turnigy graphene battery on there, so let's just put it on here. So it weighs 410 grams, so it's not ultralight in the way that some people are getting these models under 250 grams, but it is 100 grams lighter than most of my 5-inch models, so it should be still pretty fast and crazy to fly. Okay, let's go for a maiden with this thing. I'm standing well back from it, and I'm starting off in angle mode, and I need to be really careful of the throttle here, because this one probably going to have a lot of power. So I'm going to lift up on the throttle very slowly, and we're in the air, hovering at about, I would say, 40% throttle, something like that. This is going to have a huge amount of power. Yep. Ah, it feels so lightweight, nimble, smooth. Look at that. That's crazy. Really like how this one looks. And it feels really strong as well. See, I put the 2 battery straps on this, and I also put some silicone tape underneath as well to stop the battery from slipping, which I didn't show in the build. It gets away from me really quickly. That punch is unbelievable. I think this is going to be definitely the most powerful quadcopter I've got to date. Let's try the acro mode. Nice backflip. Nice roll. This is just the stock Betaflight PIDs, and seems alright. But of course we'll see when I do FPV. So this is the 1000 milliamp Turnigy graphene 4S. So hopefully I'll get a decent flight time with it. We shall see. Just a small blip on the throttle and it disappears. To be careful doing the line of sight. Oh, this is so much fun. Look at that. I'm really enjoying flying this, and this is just a Maiden. Let's just check out that punch again. Look at that. That's crazy. Right. Let's bring it in for a landing, and then I will do some FPV with it. So here is some DVR footage taken from my Fatshark Dominator HD3. It's really impressed with the quality of the video feed coming from this Flytower system. Crystal clear with no noise coming from the system. Now you can hear some sound coming through, and that's because I've got a GoPro attached, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, but I just want to stay quiet for a second because I did a little power run there down the field. This thing is absolutely ballistic, and we have inverted yaw spin there as well. So yeah, you can attach a GoPro session on this, but it's a bit tricky. I'm using my PRCJ mounts there, and I use some 3M sticky tape on that really thin top plate, and then use some cable ties, and that seemed to fix it pretty securely there. But yeah, a little bit tricky mounting a GoPro on this. Now I know this was meant to be an ultralight build, but with the GoPro on there, actually turned out to be still pretty heavy. So the all-up weight is 510 grams, and that is with a 1000 milliamp battery. Now if you remember that awesome TS195 model that I built with the wood and carbon frame, then that one came to 509 grams, so actually a little bit lighter, and that was using a full-size CCD camera as well, so maybe that's the way to go for. But I know I can make this system a lot lighter, and I think I'm probably going to annoy a lot of the ultralight guys for not going that way, because obviously if you use like a all-in-one camera VTX combo and then don't use the Flytower, you could go with like a little Pico BLX or something like that, or one of the little tiny omnibus flight controls. There's a lot of weight still to be saved, but this model is still over 100 grams lighter than my other builds, so I could definitely tell that while flying it. Felt really nimble and so fast when I was doing the power runs. The only thing I'll say is, though, for doing freestyle you don't really need all of that power. In fact, I wasn't using it most of the time. The only time I used it was for that speed run, so I guess this sort of model is going to be better for doing racing with rather than freestyle, which is good because I want to try my hand at a little bit of racing. You'll notice some days I'll put some gates up here and practice flying through them. I definitely want to get better at that. Anyway, I'll stick a link in the description of all the stuff used in this build. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I certainly enjoyed doing the build and then flying it. A new experience for me with these all-in-one components. Yeah, but as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.